Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Interesting story involving a bank and whether or not they're paying their employees properly. Stan sent me notes and Steve checked this story out. He found it at tomshardware.com, but it's a few different places on the internet. Luke James wrote this version. Bank of America sued over not paying workers for boot up time on their computers in proposed class action lawsuit. So you come into work and you fire up your computer. Your computer comes online and then you check into work. Haven't you been working the whole time you've been sitting there? Because technically, I believe you have. So the lawsuit alleges hourly workers weren't paid for computer startup tasks required before clocking in. BOA is facing a proposed class action that accuses the company of failing to pay hundreds of hourly workers for time spent booting up their computers, logging in, and then launching required software before officially starting their shifts. And what's interesting about this is I've written a few books, including a book about the Italian hall disaster called Death's Door. Death's Door is about a tragedy where someone yelled fire in a crowded theater and 73 people died trying to get out of the building. This happened during a miners' strike. One of the issues that would arise when they were discussing wages and hours was whether or not miners should get paid for their travel time from the surface down to where they're working. You might say, Steve, how long could that possibly take? Oh, it turns out that if you came and checked into work and you were working underground and you're working at a place maybe a mile down and they were running a car back and forth taking 10, 20 people at a time, you might be in line for a while. So should you get paid while you're standing in line, or should you only get paid when you're down at the bottom and you've actually made it to your workplace? And so that was something they fought about all the time. So it's actually a common complaint going back there over 100 years. So the complaint was filed by a former employee here at Bank of America. Focuses on a routine familiar to many in the modern workplace: unlocking encrypted devices, signing in with multi-factor authentication, connecting to a VPN, and launching business-critical applications. According to the filing, these tasks could take up to 30 minutes each day and were required before the employees could clock in. This could take even longer if technical problems occurred and during unpaid lunch breaks. Many systems would automatically disconnect, forcing employees to repeat parts of this protracted login process, adding approximately 3 to 5 minutes of unpaid time on most days. At the end of each shift, workers had to log out of all programs and securely close down their workstations, adding another 2 to 3 minutes. Now you might say, Steve, 2 to 3 minutes, 4 to 5 minutes. Well, it adds up. The lawsuit leans on long-standing guidance from the Department of Labor, which about 15 years ago clarified that such computer startup tasks should be considered compensable under the Fair Labor Standards Act, which of course is a federal statute. Specifically, the agency treated booting and preparing workstations as part of a worker's first principal activity if those tasks are necessary to perform the job. In this case, the plaintiff argues that launching the company's digital workspace was a prerequisite for fulfilling the analyst role and that the bank should have compensated at that time. I worked a couple of jobs when I was younger that had time clocks, the type you punch in and out of. And I remember the gas station had one right inside the door. I parked my car, walked inside, ding, ding, and checked in. Another place I worked in the basement of a building. Came into work, went downstairs, literally checked in, and then walked to where I was going to go work. As I walked out the door, the last thing I did was checked out, went up the stairs and left. And if they'd said, oh, you've got to go downstairs and turn the time clock on and wait 5 minutes, then punch in, I'd be like, is that my job? So the team here, the legal team, is seeking back pay and damages for a class they estimate includes hundreds of similarly situated business analysts and support staff who were required to use Bank of America's remote access tools before logging work hours. Plaintiffs are reportedly pursuing both class and collective action status, which would allow them to represent a broader group of affected employees across various states. Recent court rulings on similar cases have varied. In some cases, pre-login time has been found non-compensable, especially when workers were able to perform other duties while their computers booted. But if you're performing other duties for your employer, why aren't you getting paid for it? So others have sided with employees where specific boot-up sequences were clearly tied to core job functions and could not be bypassed. So as of right now, Bank of America has not officially responded to the lawsuit. It was only filed a couple weeks ago, and they always have, of course, more time than that to answer a complaint. And, of course, they might even get an extension on that and answer it later. Who knows? But as of right now, that's the complaint. So the workers were required to turn their computers on and wait till the computers came online, wait till all their equipment fired up and got online, and then they could punch in. And it might not be a lot, but if it's every single day, beginning of the day, end of the day, I saw one article where it said that sometimes for lunch, if they left and came back, they had to go through the same process again. And also, I saw some things about what happens if there's a technical problem. You're trying to get your computer online, it won't go online. So you call IT and they say, oh, we're having a problem. We'll fix it as soon as we can. So you're sitting there twiddling your thumbs, and eventually they go, okay, you can try it now. You were sitting there the whole time. Whose fault was that? And a lot of people, especially the employers and the business owners, don't understand whether I'm working or not is not the key. The question is my time mine or yours? And if it's yours, you're paying me. And I remember years ago, I once worked for somebody who actually took me to shows where we sold things. I worked in a booth selling things for somebody at trade shows, okay? A couple years. And on one occasion, flew to either New York or Los Angeles on a Thursday, set up, did this show Friday, Saturday, and then flew home on Sunday. And I got home very, very late on Sunday night. And when I went to turn in my hours for that time period, because I wasn't punching in and out of a clock, because time clock didn't travel with us to wherever we went, the person in charge of payroll goes, well, you don't get paid for Sunday. I said, why not? You weren't working. But I was flying for you. Yes, but it was a Sunday. You weren't working. Yeah, but actually I was, because I was dragging your equipment through an airport and making sure it got on board an airplane that I then got on, flew back to Detroit, and helped shepherd that stuff out and get it loaded into the vehicle that took it back to work. And then I got my own ride home. But my Sunday was spent working. I was flying, yes, but I was escorting some of your junk around the country. And the person in charge of payroll continued to argue with me, saying, but you don't get paid for Sundays. I said, but I've gone on a few trade shows where we flew back on a Monday, and I got paid for that. And she said, yeah, because that's a Monday. And I said, yeah, but I was working on Sunday, because if it wasn't for you sending me there, I wouldn't have been there to have to come back. Of course you pay me for travel days if I'm traveling for you. And we resolved the impasse when she said, that's wrong. I'm not going to pay you for that. I said, okay, I'm not going to go to any more trade shows. I didn't have that Sunday for myself. I didn't have the Saturday for myself. And you're going to pay me for Saturday but not Sunday? No more trade shows. We're done. We're done. And then after she thought about it a bit, she came back and she goes, I guess you're right. But of course, she's looking at it from the position of, I don't want to pay anybody more than I have to. And I'm looking at it going, I want to get paid. I wasted my Sunday. So that's a little more extreme than what's happening here. But like I said, it reminded me of the miners who say, look, I work in the day shift. You know, show up at 6 o'clock in the morning, work till 6 o'clock at night. Which is probably what they did. And you show up, and there's a big, long line at the man car, which they call the thing that goes down to take people down. Big line. Takes people down in groups. You can't work until you get to the front of the line and get down there. But you're there. Shouldn't you get paid? So these arguments have gone back as far as people have gotten paid to work. And the Department of Labor has tried to clarify this. And I think Bank of America probably thought, who's going to care about a couple minutes? Well, class action lawyers, and we'll see what happens. But Stan, thanks for sending that from tomshardware.com, and like I said, published in a variety of places. But Luke James wrote this. Bank of America sued over not paying workers for PC boot-up time in proposed class action lawsuit. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Hey, don't follow me. I'm lost too.